Time for the press review with Alison Sargent. Good to see you, Alison.
Hi, Delano.
We're going to start out talking about the conflict over in Ethiopia. The Washington Post has been speaking to refugees in Sudan who fled the region of Tigray.
That's right. As many as 4,000 people are arriving every day in Sudan from Tigray in Ethiopia. And they come with horrible stories we read here in the Washington Post. One person told the paper they are killing people madly. Another described seeing people beheaded and described it as a genocide against the Tigray people. Now, the Washington Post is very clear that these accounts of violence could not be independently verified. And they also say that the Ethiopian government denies that the military has attacked civilians. There are concerns, Delano, that this conflict in Ethiopia could really destabilize the entire region, and it could be made worse by the fact that Donald Trump is expected to pull U.S. troops out of neighbouring Somalia. As the New York Times reports, Somali officials are warning that that decision could be disastrous for the country's security. Analysts say that it would empower al-Shabaab and other terrorist groups who would frame it as a victory for them, ultimately adding up to the instability of the entire region.
We'll see what happens. Moving on next to here in Europe, and you're moving to Germany, where the front pages are dominated by those protests which we saw against COVID-19 restrictions.
That's right, against COVID-19 restrictions and the government's infection protection law, which creates a legal basis for the country's restrictions, which until now had been issued by government decree. It was debated and passed yesterday by Germany's parliament, not without protests, as we see here on the front page of Frankfurter Allgemeine. The protest had to be broken up by police with water cannons. Now, critics say that this law gives the government too much power and endangers civil rights. As Deutsche Welle reports, Germany's far-right AfD party has gone so far as to compare the law to the 1933 Enabling Act, which paved the way for Hitler to come to power. The paper writes, though, that those two laws are hardly comparable, and they quote a Social Democrat MP who said the more apt comparison is actually a law passed in 1923 during the Weimar Republic, when Germany was facing a currency crisis and had to take emergency financial measures. Once again, this is a moment of crisis, only this time it's a sanitary one.
Staying with the coronavirus pandemic next, Alison, and there's an article in The Guardian reporting that mutations of the virus caused by mink have been found in 7 countries.
Yeah, concerns about mink have been growing ever since it was found.
I thought we called all the mink.
And right, well, we're going to get to that in a second, Delano. There have been concerns about the mink ever since it was shown that outbreaks among them could mutate, and then the virus that was in a mutated form could then be transferred back to humans. Now we're reading in The Guardian that cases of humans with these mink-related variations have been found in the Netherlands, South Africa, Switzerland, the Faroe Islands, Russia, the U.S. state of Utah, and then, of course, Denmark. Now, Denmark is the country where this problem was first found. They are a top producer of mink fur. And like you said, Delano, Denmark's government ordered 2 weeks ago that the entire population of mink in the country be culled or killed over fears of that mutation spreading.
And that order has led to a major political fallout for the government after it was found to be unlawful.
That's right. Denmark's agricultural minister stepped down yesterday over this. We see him on the front page of many Danish papers today. Here he is alongside the country's prime minister, Mette Frederiksen. The paper writes that the government was repeatedly warned that they had no legal basis for this order. Basically, they could order a cull on farms that had been infected, but not on all farms, regardless of infection. They ultimately went ahead with it anyway. Now, some people are even calling for the prime minister to step down as well. In this cartoon on the front page of another Danish paper, we see there the prime minister wearing a raggedy mink stole. You'll notice that it has the head of the agricultural minister. The paper writes that the prime minister is basically safe now because the agricultural minister is the one who took the political hit.
Let's see what happens. And finally, Alison, this year's Christmas tree outside Rockefeller Center in New York City was facing criticism, ridicule for its sparse branches, but then it found it contained its surprise.
That's right, Delano. They found a tiny owl in the Christmas tree. It's adorable. You can take a look at it.
I don't know if owls are adorable. First, I know you like cats.
This one's adorable. You don't think? I think it's
either.
So cute. I thought it looks like it's a baby owl, but it's actually just a type of owl that's very small. It's called a saw-whet owl. Workers found it while they were unwrapping the tree. It's unclear if it was in the tree when the tree was cut down because workers usually check for birds and other animals before they do that. So the hypothesis is maybe it came and roosted in the tree when it was already brought to New York City. Regardless, the owl has been transferred to a wildlife center for rehabilitation, and the caretakers there say that it's doing very well, and they have decided to name it Rockefeller, an appropriate name after Rockefeller Center. Now, Delano, this could be seen as a positive omen after, as you said, the tree was getting made fun of on social media. As we read here in the New York Times, many saw its sort of scraggly state as a metaphor for 2020. Basically, not even the trees are having a good year. But this article is quite hopeful. The writer says, look, it just needs some time. Once it's all decked out with its decorations and lit up on December 2nd, it's going to be looking quite beautiful. And I say that even makes it sort of a metaphor for the resilience of 2020.